My name is Rideout. I'm here with Tax Credit Connection, and just wanted to welcome you to this roundtable discussion. We designed this to be hopefully very collaborative, and we're going to be discussing a big shift for our community, which is, as you probably know if you're here in this session, that we're on to the state issuing credits for the year 2027 and beyond. As of this morning, I checked, we have less than 5 million credits left in the 2027 cap. And this new normal raises really important questions about how do we plan ahead, how do we communicate, across all of these different organizations and community members that we serve, and how can we set ourselves up for success? So we have a great group here. I'll introduce them in a second. And we are thrilled to share a wonderful discussion with you. So let's see. Let's start with everyone just saying their name and who they work with. Does that work?
Sure. I'm Ariel, Steele with Tax Credit Connection.
You guys hear me? I'm Brendan Boepple. I'm the Director of Conservation of the Colorado Cattlemen's Agricultural Land Trust.
I am Pam Taylor. I am a CPA from Craig, and I work very closely with these guys with all the tax planning with the tax credits.
Wonderful. So just to set the stage a little bit, I have a few questions prepared for these lovely folks. And then we're going to see if we can open it up to a broader discussion. We don't claim to have any of the answers related to this, but we certainly have some good questions and some smart minds in the room. So it'll be interesting to see what we come up with. And let's start with just one big picture question, and we'll go down the line with each of you. So we've seen that all of the credits for 2025 and 2026 have been claimed, and the state is now well into issuing credits for 2027. Can you maybe give a brief introduction of yourself and touch on how you work with a credit in your role, each of your roles?
Great. So again, I'm Ariel Steele with Tax Credit Connection, and we help landowners to get the tax credits. We work with them on their application to the state. And then we help them to sell whatever amount of credits they can't use on their own taxes. So we work with their CPAs and their other advisors to help figure out how many credits they can use to themselves, whether it's for the refund or whether it's for their own taxes. And then we work really hard to find buyers to buy the tax credits. And so is that kind of where we should end?
Yeah.
That part? Okay, great. Oh, sorry.
We're learning on the fly here. So.
I might just leave this on. So at CCALT, like many land trusts in the room, obviously we fund a lot of our conservation easement transactions, at least partially using the tax credit. That I like to talk about how the pendulum has sort of swung in different directions over the last really 4 or so years. If you go back to HB 21-1233 with the change to 90%, prior to that, we were seeking more bargain sale funding. That was the, getting to the bottom line for our landowners. So using a lot of NRCS funds, using a lot of some CPW funds and things like that. Then they sort of obviously swung in this direction where it was just more efficient and faster to work through some of those donated transactions. And given the 90%, the return to the landowner was pretty similar, honestly, to having to go out and secure 50% or so bargain sale funding. So that's, tax credit. And then I would say that pendulum is now obviously starting to swing back. That's what we'll talk a little bit about today, because, landowners are still seeing the value in tax credits, but often a lot of the working landowners that we work with are carrying debt or have more immediate needs. They want to expand their operation and things like that. So that's our kind of conservation easement transactions side of things. About 3 years ago, we also started a credit brokerage service for those landowners that do conservation easements with CCALT. Started brokering those credits directly for those landowners that do easements with us, and so that's given us even more familiarity into the workings of the Division of Conservation, the tax credit program, some of the incredibly difficult forms that the Division of Revenue has schemed up to track some of these things. And so, yeah, we kind of have the traditional transactions role, and then also this tax credit brokerage role that we've stepped into in the last few years.
So I think I am the only CPA here for this summit presentation. But my role is, when I work with Ariel and the group, is to help the landowners decide what to do with those tax credits. A lot of them are like, we have no idea. So what my job is, I want to see these clients immediately. We need to do tax planning. We need to know, are you doing a bargain sale? How many tax credits are you getting? And when can those certificates be utilized? If we can get the landowners in soon enough, then we can play a really big role in saving them a lot of tax, thousands of dollars, and help them capitalize on these refunds that the state of Colorado is issuing. You know, the Tabor, when we have the Tabor refund years, they can get up to $50,000. In 2027, that goes up to $200,000 for each tax certificate. So if we play a really big role in the very beginning of the conservation easement, then we can make sure we can capitalize on these refunds, make sure they don't sell too many credits, save some credits for their personal use. So basically, with proper tax planning, my role is to minimize the tax liability and capitalize on those refunds and, help with the sale of the credits. And like I say, we work very closely with Ariel and the group on that.
Wonderful. Let's go into some specific questions for each of you. I'm just going to go, well, I don't know, let's mix it up. I'm going to popcorn. Just to keep you on your toes. Let's start with Brendan. Brendan, what do you tell landowners about credit timing? Do you have any tips for explaining how this all works?
Sure, and I actually want to take a step even backwards. I think you have to have an initial conversation with the landowner to talk about tax credits themselves and how this program works. A lot of these folks, at least in the rural communities that we work in, still have memories of when the state was coming after tax credits. We still hear, I have no interest in those phony tax credits. Those aren't a real thing. And it really has been a great success story over the last many years, but even just since 2021 and the creation of the certificate program and the way that we've created a lot of integrity in this program, we should remember to kind of promote that up front and say, this is really, these credits are as good as gold. And like once they're issued, you're good. But that's even a step you need to work to with some landowners, to just say, like, I know you have these memories, you maybe had a neighbor, but like, this is a different program now. Someone said this last year, but I sort of chafe at the idea, but that the conservation community in Colorado loves to be regulated. And because we want this program to work really well, and we don't want it to kind of backslide in any way. So that would be, I know that wasn't the question, but I'd like to mention that up front, that there's a conversation that needs to be had there, that needs to be had initially. So we need to really remember that there's a lot of positive developments in the program. I find that a lot of folks can understand now the $50 million, you got $50 million annually, and then it starts rolling into the next year. It starts rolling next year, but you can't, whoever's using that credit can't use it until it's in that specific year. The elimination of the wait list in 24 made this a lot easier because there was this wait list thing. It was wasn't really a wait list. It was sort of this set aside for credits. And that was really a difficult thing to explain. I found myself having a hard time explaining it to my colleagues sometimes. So that's, I think that sort of $50 million annual cap is really important. As far as we're concerned, transparency is just so critical here, and constant communication. Talking to the landowners, making really clear that this is the likely outcome given your anticipated closing. We think you're going to be at this point in 28 or 29. And just, it's not a time to be aggressive with our closing estimations here and really say, this is what we think this is going to look like. We've started incorporating a lot of that into our pro formas that we share with landowners to make really clear that, these future use credits may be discounted, you might not be able to use them, and things like that. A lot of these folks we work with are business owners. Farmers and ranchers are business owners. They understand the time cost of money. When we start talking about these future years credits and whether that's trying to sell them upon issuance and what the discount might be, you need to talk about that, make it clear to them that, these can be sold, they're going to be issued to you upon, 120 days after application. Because I think a lot of folks have this assumption that, I'm not going to get that 2028 credit until 2028. And it's no, actually, it's going to get issued 120 days after they submit that application, and then you can sell it. There's a whole other discussion I'm sure we'll have on kind of the market for future years credits. But, and then my last point on this is Pam and her business partner, Sean Durham, we work with very closely. Encourage folks to get a good accountant. We work with a lot of folks that have very little interest in seeking legal services. And as you can imagine, we kind of work through that. With this tax credit situation, a good accountant is critical. And you really have to understand how to move through that process and really encourage folks to get their accountant involved sooner, and make sure that maybe it even involves you getting on the phone with that accountant to talk to them a little bit, because your average accountant does not really know how to grapple with this. And so that's really critical. And again, we are in a position where I am sure many of you cannot offer legal or financial advice to landowners. And so they've got to get that outside advice from elsewhere. So
Cool. Let's pass over to Pam, actually, speaking of a good accountant. And Pam, I'd love to hear your perspective on how early you'd like your clients to involve you if they're planning to do a conservation easement, and why.
So the timing issue is very, very critical. The earlier we can meet with them, the better off we are. The more value we can add to what we do. So I recommend immediately that they meet with us. And the initial conversation should address 3 key points. Are you doing a bargain sale? Approximately how many tax credits are you receiving? And in which year can the tax credits be utilized? The reason that the bargain sale is such a key point is a lot of landowners don't realize that that is a taxable transaction. We can take a portion of the cost basis of the land against that sale, but in most cases, this land has been owned for decades and the cost basis is very low. So it ends up being a pretty high taxable gain on that. A common misconception is that tax credits can be used immediately to sell or to offset that gain to pay the tax liability, which is not the case, as you know. They can't be sold immediately. So the landowner's got to be prepared to pay that tax. Another misconception is, well, I'll just use my donation to offset that sale. Well, that donation gets reduced by the value of the tax credits. So at 90%, we're looking at a very small donation, and it will help, but it doesn't completely offset that gain. The reason we ask the question about how many tax credits you're receiving is, like I said earlier, we want to capitalize on those refunds. If the landowners don't need that immediate cash flow, let's save that. Let's get that refunded. We like to do a preliminary estimate of what is the donation going to cost you with the state of Colorado. Let's save some of those credits. Let's, maximize the cash flow here. Another thing that we like to plan for, we ask the question of, in which year are you going to be able to use those tax credits? If you're selling everything in year 1, your certificates for 2 years down the road, you got to pay that tax. Those tax credits are not going to do you any good personally. Go ahead and sell them, or if you don't need the cash flow, save them and take advantage of the refunds available. Another thing that landowners need to be aware of is if they're doing a donation-only easement and there is no bargain sale, there's no cash. Like Brandon said, those tax certificates are delayed, and there's not always a buyer for 2 years down the road. So all the upfront costs of the 50 to 100,000, I'm not sure exactly how much it all costs, but that can be very challenging to come up with that money to pay all of that up front. And then, okay, now, we can't get that tax credit money. That's been a challenge. So I think what I'm really trying to say is if we as the CPAs or the financial advisors can get involved early, we can kind of minimize that tax liability, help them figure out what are we going to do with these credits and capitalize on those refunds. I mean, that's a huge thing. If the state's going to offer that, I mean, it takes business away from you probably, Ariel, but it's a great thing. It's a great thing. So if you take anything away from this today is, please refer them to someone who knows what they're doing with this.
Can we ask questions as we go?
I don't know.
They were gonna have.
Please hold your questions. You will have a designated question time in which you will be allowed to ask your question. Thank you. I'm glad we have interested participants. All right, I'm going to move on to Ariel.
Okay.
Ariel, let's move to the other side of the equation, the buyers. Question for you is, are buyers interested in purchasing future years credits even though they can't use them yet?
Okay. And maybe even what that means.
Yeah, so think about this. You have an opportunity to buy something. Let's say it's a gift certificate to your favorite restaurant, but you can't go to that restaurant until 2028. So how much are you going to pay for a $100 gift certificate to your favorite restaurant when you can't go to it for 3 more years? You're not going to give someone $100 for that. So this is exactly what our buyers are looking at when we say, hey, would you like to buy a 2028 certificate of tax credits now in 2025? And so, for the right discount, they are interested. And so, as we tell people, you can expect to receive a net of 85 cents on the dollar, whatever it might be. Well, if they're going to sell a tax credit certificate for, say, 2028 in 2025, they're going to have to most likely sell it for less than that because the buyer is going to want to be compensated for giving up their money 3 years in advance. And so in kind of figuring out how much of a discount the buyer would want to take, it's still really new. I mean, this is new because it's new for us to have these future year credits. Just the last couple of years we've had them. And so we don't have a really set market price yet. But what I look at is, okay, if someone were to take the money and put it into a money market fund at their bank or whatnot, for a while they were earning 5%, now they're earning closer to 4%, they'd probably want at least that kind of a discount to be able to justify parting with their money early, so that amount per year. So we're just, we're waiting to see how it all shakes out as far as what buyers are willing to do. And we'll see how that goes. But we are preparing people, if we talk to them about, if you want to sell your credits right away, be prepared to take a bigger discount, and we'll see how minimal we can make it. But obviously, like Brendan said, they understand that money has a time value. The other thing to think about is, if you're an individual, these credits can only be sold one time. We tried to get that changed in 2024, and unfortunately, the governor didn't allow that provision to stay in the bill. We're going to try for it again whenever we bring legislation next, because the problem is, if I sell a tax credit to Caroline and she can't use it for 3 more years, well, she thinks she's going to live in Colorado in 3 years, but what if some amazing opportunity comes up and she moves to Montana and then now she doesn't have a Colorado tax liability? She just threw her money away. Like, she can't resell that to Pam for her to use it on her taxes. But if we get to where we can do multiple transfers, then Caroline won't be so worried about that, because she'll know if I can't use it because I move out of Colorado, I can sell it to someone else. We don't have that yet. So we're really looking at corporations or insurance companies as buyers of these future year credits, because, say, I'm staying in the Holiday Inn. Whoever owns Holiday Inn, they know that there's going to be Holiday Inns in Colorado in 3 years. So if they decided to buy tax credits, they'd know they're going to have a tax liability 3 years from now. It's not a big risk for them that they're going to close every single Holiday Inn in the entire state. But an individual does have that risk. So those are some of the things that our buyers are dealing with. And I think it's helpful for you to know that, just as you're talking to people and thinking about why is it harder to sell these tax credits for future years.
Thanks, Ariel. I'm going to pass it back over to Brendan. So the question I have for you is, what are landowners saying and how are they responding to the news that the credit is so far out? And have you had anyone decline to do an easement specifically because of this reason?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I don't know if I can draw the direct correlation on any specific deal where someone sort of said, I'm going to kind of walk away because I don't like the tax credits. I would say that we've been trying to sweeten the deal in other ways to say, well, we can work with this transaction cost program so that when you show up at closing, you don't need to deliver us $50,000+ and things like that. I do think, excuse me, that we are, I do think we'll hit a point, and I think there's a tipping point a little bit, and so I'm interested to see what happens in 2028 and things like that. But I think what I also try and remind our staff to talk about is that this is still a pretty great opportunity for conservation. If you look nationally across the country, that this is still a pretty good deal if you're able to wait. And there's a whole sort of equity issue wrapped up in that piece, if you can wait. But we also talk about, well, your alternative might be a bargain sale, and we go apply to NRCS for funding, but we might not get it in the first round. Maybe we get it in the second round, and your deal might close in kind of 3 years anyway. And so it's, and so if you talk about the donated, that's just, these are the options we have to lay out to landowners and talk about that. So I think we are starting to see, again, that it's swinging back towards bargain sales, and folks want to see, they have their bottom line, they've got their number they need to get to. We're starting to see some of that, but again, it's still a great opportunity for conservation, and we just need to get creative on kind of how we blend this credit and future years credits, either with bargain sales or other incentives and things like that. So.
Thank you. So I would love to open it up to kind of just a general Q&A. I have some questions to help us frame our discussion, but would love to just see hands of anyone that has a question, and I will come to you and bring you a microphone so that we can all hear each other.
Awesome.
And Jody, we'll start with you. I need like Jeopardy music or something.
There you go.
Yes. Give me 1 sec.
Thank you, Caroline. You're an amazing host. Pam, this question is for you, two-part. The first question on the refunds. We hear from our landowners that it can take 6 to 8 months to actually receive their refund. Is that in line with what most of your clients are seeing?
Yeah, we really haven't had the Tabor refund. I really haven't dealt with the Tabor refund for several years, but I know when we did have it, they kept calling me, why am I not getting my refund? I think there's an extra level of, I guess you could say, auditing or review at the state level to determine that these refunds are really, they really did this conservation easement. We really have all the paperwork. We've really gone through the appraisals. All the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. So I think you're exactly right on that. It will take a while to get those refunds.
Okay. Then my second question is, for landowners that are doing bargain sales, do you recommend that they do a 1031 exchange with the proceeds from the bargain sale?
That would be ideal. Because then we get rid of this taxable sale that you gotta pay tax on, and, you know, maybe the bank took all the money because you have a mortgage on it, or, you know, you didn't do your proper tax planning and you spent all the money on something else. So yeah, absolutely. If at all possible, those 1031 exchanges are great.
Thank you.
All right, we've got Carmen. Did you have a question? All right, Christy.
Brendan, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. I know land trusts typically try to keep an arm's length from tax benefits. And so I'm wondering what sort of calculus Cattlemen's went through to decide to go into the brokering business.
Sure, we had, I'd say there's probably two major considerations. We had one was our own nonprofit status. So we had to take a look at that and make sure, and work with an attorney to make sure that wasn't generating unrelated business income and questioning that nonprofit status at all. So that was one legal opinion that we secured before we got into doing this. As part of that, we said that we will only ever broker tax credits on CCALT conservation easements. We're not going to start brokering other people's tax credits because then we start looking a lot more like a broker and not a conservation organization. And then the other is we have a pretty thorough engagement letter that just lines out, like, we have a requirement for a long time it was a requirement for both legal and financial counsel, and you had to put the name on the engagement letter, and we said, you know, this person is going to continue to be engaged. If we feel they aren't engaged, you know, and we feel like we're being put in a comfortable position, we have the right to terminate this agreement, and we don't want to get there. I'll admit we've softened that a little bit, and now it's really, we've realized like a good accountant is really what's so critical here, and a financial planner. And so, and we just make very clear that we are not in any way, shape, or form providing legal or financial advice. And so it is a little bit different than some of the other brokerage offerings out there. I will say that, you know, for the other brokers in the room, they, I don't know exactly how they conduct business, but I think they can help with some of those questions a little bit more, or feel a little more comfortable. We are still very much staying away from that third rail that is providing legal or financial advice, which can be, I will admit, can be frustrating for landowners sometimes. They want me to just tell them how to do this, and I'm like, listen, you've got to go talk to your accountant, you've got to go talk to your attorney and figure that out. And I'd be willing to get on the phone with them maybe and talk, you know, through how I see it. But so there were kind of two steps there, both making sure that we were continuing to comply with our 501c3 status, but also that we weren't putting ourselves in any additional legal liability. So
I have a second part to my question. Caroline, you shouldn't have left me with this. Do you require that landowners who are doing easements with you use you to broker their tax credits?
No, we do not. It's entirely voluntary, and we make that very clear in the engagement letter. And has no bearing on future years conservation easements. That there is this is a marketplace and an industry with other brokers, and we do not make a requirement in any way, shape, or form that they work with us.
Other questions? Carmen, did you have a question?
Just a clarification on 1031, because we sort of
Yeah.
touched on it briefly, but we were talking about the context of bargain sale proceeds, not tax credit sale proceeds. So I just want to make sure folks understood the distinction that you cannot 1031.
Can you use the microphone because they're recording us? Can you say it again because they're recording us?
Yeah, just a clarification on 1031, and we glossed over that you can do that with bargain sale proceeds. Just want to make it clear that you cannot do that with tax credit sale proceeds.
Folks know what a 1031 is? So maybe we should explain a 1031.
Who knows what a 1031 is?
Okay.
Oh, good.
Who wants to answer that?
Pam, you can do
All right,
it.
who in the audience? Wade, what is a 1031?
Why?
Nope, you gotta wait.
It's recording.
Did you really not hear me to begin with? 1031 is a tax vehicle that if you are selling real estate, you can basically bring in another LLC where technically when you sell your property, the funds don't go to you, they go to the LLC, and then you have 6 months to find a replacement property to reinvest the money in, and then you don't pay taxes on it. You can extend it. Pam, I'm going to refer to you of how often you can extend it before you have to spend it, because I have worked with people that took longer than 6 months.
I'm not
Sorry, it might have been on.
I didn't have my glasses on.
No worries.
So I'm not sure how to answer that question. I do know you have to hold it under the same LLC. So if this LLC sells, that LLC has to hold that property for 2 years so that you don't void that 1031 exchange. I am not clear, I'm not for sure
Yeah,
on the
I just-
timing of
I just know
finding the property.
there's an initial 6-month period that you need to reinvest the proceeds, and you can't extend that, but I
Right.
just don't know.
You can't extend,
When?
you cannot extend it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you have 45 days to identify it, and then, is it 6 months, Jody? I'm trying to remember.
45 days to identify a property. When they say identify a property.
Can you hand her the mic? Because we're recording this for other people, so we want to make sure people can hear it.
So in a 1031 exchange, yes, you have to identify a property within 45 days. And you can say, hey, out of these 5 properties or 3 properties, I'm going to pick one, and you have to close on that within 180 days. 6
Okay,
months, is that what
yeah.
180 days is?
Yeah.
Yeah. And there is no extension to that.
Yeah.
And the proceeds happen through what's called a qualified intermediary, which is where the funds go to this qualified intermediary first before they go to the actual seller.
Well, I was wrong.
Thank you for
You're
that
close.
clarification.
You were very close.
We're
Wade.
also glad
Very
to know that
close.
Wade was wrong. Okay, now we go into the roast portion. No, all right. Eddie? Okay, great.
That's why I volunteered.
I volunteered to get things wrong so I could ask questions. I would like to hear more about what you were guys referring to, the possibility of reselling the tax credits after you sell them once. Or, I'm kind of making this up because there's actually a deal, you guys sold the tax credits on 10 years ago. I've had landowners in the past who bought property, sold a conservation easement on it at a bargain sale, and then wanted to give their tax credits to the previous owner as a form of payment. But they couldn't sell them because it doesn't work that way. And I'm just curious what's in motion to potentially modify that, because I agree that would be a huge thing if you could
Right.
resell the tax credits, and what kind of efforts are being made, how can we support that?
Oh, thank you. Yes, that's a great question. So there's 3 kinds of transferable credits in Colorado. So ours is the oldest one, the conservation credit. And then in 2014, 2 new ones got created. One is for historic rehabilitation, and one is for environmental remediation, so environmental cleanup. The historic one was based on a Missouri tax credit program, and it has the provision that the credits could be sold multiple times. So a buyer of a tax credit could resell that tax credit. That's the only one of our 3 programs that has that provision. And so we tried to get that exact language added to the conservation easement statute. And in all the years that we've worked with the historic tax credits, we've never resold a credit. So it's not like this is something that gets done all the time. People don't speculatively buy them and mark them back up and that kind of thing. But it is nice, I know, at least for us, and I would bet that Mike and Jody also have buyers who bought credits and then can't use them. Like I have a client who bought, $80,000 worth of credits, used 20,000 of them, and then moved to Texas. And so he's like, what can I do with the rest of my credits? And I said, hang on to them in case we get this law passed, and we'll resell them for you at that point. And you have 20 years for that to happen. So whenever we do get to the point where it makes sense to bring legislation again, as we all know, our program sunsets at the end of 2031. So sometime between now and 2031, we will be bringing legislation, or all of us who work with the tax credit part of the conservation world will not have jobs anymore. So we're definitely gonna want to keep that tool alive. So in the next 5 or 6 years, we'll be bringing legislation to extend the program, which would be a great opportunity to just put that language back in. Our governor is term limited, so he's only with us for 1 more legislative session. So by 2027, there'll be a different governor that hopefully will think that multiple transfers is a great idea. So that's basically what's happening. And when we get to that point, we would love for all of you to understand why it's important. It gives more options of different types of buyers for all of our landowners. So it helps all of us by helping our landowners to have more buyers they can sell to.
Ariel, would you say that the possibility of multiple transfers could also help alleviate some of the pressure we're seeing with the future year
Yes.
credits?
Definitely, because if we have that ability, then Caroline can buy credits for 2028 at a bigger discount, hang on to them, and if she is not allowed to move.
I'm
but
not
if-
moving to Montana, Ariel.
No,
Sorry.
but if she were to, then she could still sell them to Pam. So that would make it so that individual buyers, rather than just corporations and insurance companies, it would be safe for them to buy tax credits for future years. So I think it would open up that market a little bit more.
Hello. Question for you. Pam, you are a unicorn, and I am wondering if there are many more of you around the state, if you are just so inundated with this work, and would you offer this kind of teaching to other accountants? And I'm just finding that for example, I have a landowner who has a ranch in Colorado, lives in California, and I've talked to their accountant before in California, and it's not translating the way that I would hope it could. So I just would love to hear more from you.
Thank you. I love being a unicorn. It's my shirt. It's the colorful shirt, I'm sure. So my business partner is absolutely awesome with this. He couldn't be here today, but we have taken the stance that we need to specialize in these conservation easements because there is such a need for it. I'm going to be totally honest and say that we spend just as much time redoing conservation easements that other accountants who did not know what they were doing messed up and they got rejected, and it's a huge mess. So there are several. I know that Ariel works with several, and Jody works with several other accountants in the state. I actually got taught by a lady from Colorado Springs, and I wish I knew her name and I could reach back out to her, but she was so helpful to me 20 years ago when I first started doing this, and then I brought it back to the firm I was working with and taught everyone there. So I think the teaching part is possible. I don't know if you just do seminars. I mean, that's something that I'm completely in the dark on how to teach other accountants, and my time's valuable, so it's like there's got to be some kind of a kickback for doing that, unfortunately. But yeah, I think it's a great idea. I was talking to someone this morning about the same thing. How do we bring up the younger generation to know, what we have learned from working so many years with this? How do we pass that on? So that's a great question. I'm open to suggestions.
Yeah, here we go.
Oh, I was just going to support what you were saying, Pam. And for everyone who's in the room, can you spell your last name and tell us what your number is? But on that point, that Keep It Colorado, I'm on the board, is going to try to create some apprenticeship and education opportunities, both for appraisers and accountants, because of this really important need. So to be determined, but it's on our radar screen for immediate, urgent needs for all of us, basically, to keep doing this work. So thank you for what you're doing, and I hope we can find a way to translate your knowledge to many others who would want to do the same. I also have a question for you.
Okay.
Can I make a really quick comment to what you guys are talking about? Refer people to Pam and Sean. I mean, we refer people to them all the time. She's right. There are a couple of other accountants who do this as well, and they're great also. But most accountants don't want to learn this, and that's the truth of it. And so we've had a lot of situations where the accountant from California gets on the phone with Pam, and pays for Pam's time, and maybe Pam will do a portion of the return, or maybe she'll just do a lot of guidance with the other accountant on how to do these different pieces. But I would strongly encourage that you get people referred to Pam and Sean, or if there is another accountant in your geographical area that's very knowledgeable about it to that person, because even if it's just an hour or two of their time, it's so valuable, because it's a mess when we're trying to clean these up, and the tax software doesn't do it right. So if they just throw it into the tax software, it's going to come out wrong, and they just really need to understand it. So that's my plug. And thank you, Jessica, for bringing that up. I didn't know that was is part of what Keep It Colorado is doing. So that's
Yeah, that's
fantastic.
part of the roadmap. We're trying to bolster and support the professional groups that are essential to this work for all of us and landowners. Pam, you mentioned that you're going to presume that the refunds are taxable by the IRS, and I did a little, before this moment, dangerous research on that and found that the IRS is unlikely to tax refunds at the federal level. So I'm just wondering where you're coming from with that. Probably very apt, cynical perspective, but is there, I know there's a SALT breakdown in terms of state and local taxes and whether you itemize. So it may be that if it is taxable, it's a very nominal amount for us because we have to subtract 90% of the value. So I'll stop talking, but I was just wondering if there was something behind the seed of what you said in terms of we're going to assume the IRS is going to try to tax the refund.
So we've been trying to do research on this, Sean and my partner and I, and what we have come up with is that the state refunds that are due to hardship are not taxable, which would mean earned income credit, the stimulus payment we got a few years ago, those refunds were never taxable. And so the guidance that we've found and the court cases that we've gone through are stating that if it's due to a hardship, these refunds are not taxable. Any other refund is taxable. And so the logic to me is if I'm going to sell these credits, that's a taxable transaction. If the state's just going to refund the money, why would that be different? And like I say, we're still researching this. We have not, I'm leaning a little more towards not taxable, but my partner's leaning towards they are taxable and we got to follow these court cases. So that's one thing that we're trying to work out as to, what we're going to do. But I think for planning purposes, be prepared to pay the tax on those refunds when we're guiding our clients, just because it's the unknown right now. It's a big gray area.
I would just add to that, I want you to ignore your partner and just go with your instinct, but is the partner in the room? Did the partner just actually boo me? The research I conducted showed that it breaks down not based on need, but based on whether you itemize or not. And so non-itemizers are not taxed, and itemizers are taxed, but only to the limit of SALT. So that's just enough to be dangerous, as I said. But I think we should collectively answer this question, because I think the refunds historically are showing that the IRS is typically not taxing refunds. So if that's the general rule, I want us to be squarely within that. And I'll stop talking about taxing the refunds, but I think it's important for us to know.
It's really important. We should definitely get you and Sean and Pam together for you to share your
not
stuff.
Just me, but I mean, we collectively, we all need to figure this out, because if you get 200 grand tax-free, different than
different.
200 grand subtracting SALT, adding 10%, limit on 10,000, whatever all that is, it's just more brain damage we don't understand. So I will stop talking now.
No, I think that is such a great point, and I actually wrote in my notes things that I know someone is going to ask, and how should I be prepared to answer those. And it really is an unknown area. Ariel and I have had these conversations before. It's something we definitely need to all be on the same page and come up with some guidance. How do we determine this? And I just wish it was cut and dried, but it's not.
Am I done?
I have a question related to the discounts that are being considered by potential buyers for future tax credits. As a real estate appraiser, part of our initial conversations with clients entails, how value is derived from doing conservation easements, what restrictions drive value, what don't. And, we walk through scenarios talking about hypotheticals of like, what if your before value is $1 million and your after value is $500,000, and then you have this much easement value, and walking it down just a little bit. I always advise them to talk to tax credit brokers, of course, but, traditionally we've said, if you have an easement value of $1 million, your tax credits will be $900,000, and then, a tax credit broker typically takes sorry, my voice went away. Typically takes, 10, mostly 15% of that, again, as a brokerage fee to process the tax credits for them. So, I'm just trying to think about, is it now going to be, if they're looking at 2028 taxes, is it going to be like a 20% now? Or is it like an additional 5% that might be considered by, a broker and or buyer?
Yeah, that's a great question. And just to be clear, the 15%, that includes the buyer's discount. So the buyers don't pay 100 cents on the dollar, they pay 90 something-ish. So I just want to make sure no one thinks that we make 15%. That would be fantastic, but we don't. So I would think that probably buyers are, if we're going to be selling these en masse, every once in a while you find someone who's willing to pay maybe more than it seems rational that they would pay. And we always say thank you and are grateful that a deal could get done and help a landowner out with a smaller discount for a future year. But rationally, to me, it seems like 4 or 5% per year. So if we're talking 3 years into the future, it might be an additional 15% discount. I don't know, because we haven't done a deal like that yet. But that just seems rational to me, because that money, if you took it and you did something super safe with it and just put it in an FDIC insured money market account, you're going to earn 4 or 5%. So why wouldn't the buyer expect to have that? And that buyer might be having it in a not FDIC insured money market account. They might have it in some other kind of fund, and they're making 8 or 10%. So they may just say, a 4 to 5% discount isn't enough. I'd rather wait till 2028 and buy credits then and keep my money working for me. So it's that we don't have an answer. I don't have an answer yet. I don't know if anybody else has an answer yet as to what the market is bearing. But I definitely think that's the way buyers are going to think about it. So Mike, Jody, Brendan, do you have any insights on how they're thinking about it? I think it'd be great to hear other perspectives.
I'll just offer a perspective really quick. To Ariel's point, this is like a bigger macroeconomic question. What's the economy doing? What can you do with your money? What are interest rates like? So 3 years ago, interest rates cost you 2% to borrow money. We had future years buyers in years past. They're now all saying, well, I'm not sure what the economy is doing in general and things like that. So it is really hard to put a number on it. And that market has, at least for us, I know others have been able to establish future year credit buyers, has sort of chilled a little bit. But I'd be curious to hear if Mike or Jody have any perspective on this as well.
There's the microphone. Who has the microphone? Oh, John, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
The number we're seeing is 5%. And it's, I think, just because it's a good playground number, it's easy, as opposed to saying some sort of floating cost of funds that, right now, cost of funds is about 4.2% probably, but with inflation going up and down, 5% is the number that we're seeing. And let me also say, just while I have the microphone, it's certainly true that part of the problem is if you can't resell the credits, that's an issue. And Ariel pointed out saying that Holiday Inn Express, will be here 2 years from now. But the problem is they don't know for sure that their taxes will be here 2 years from now. And we, for example, at one point we were selling to Coors, and all of a sudden they merged with Molson, and they had no tax liability anymore, even though they're still a productive beer manufacturer. And the same thing, I think, happened to one of your clients. So these mergers and acquisitions can make your future year taxes that you're planning for evaporate.
Thanks for that perspective. Jody, do you want to add anything?
I would say the same thing, I don't have anything else to add.
+1 from Jody. Thank you.
Ariel, you mentioned the scary year of 2031. We're getting awfully close to issuing tax credits for 2031 and beyond. Can you talk a little bit about that, what the future may hold there?
I can talk about it. I don't have an answer, but what I know is that Jody did a draft of the tax notes incorporating the changes from a year ago and shared that with the Department of Revenue, who has not said yes or no on that yet. Is that correct, Jody? I mean, let's get Jody the microphone.
Yeah, Jessica J and I both did kind of a deep dive on this and did the draft of the income tax topic, and they adopted a lot of what we requested. We had put in the chart of the tax credit cap saying, it's 50 million all the way through 2031, and then we said 2032, no cap. They didn't adopt that.
Oh, did they actually adopt some of what you did?
Yes, they did.
Oh, I didn't know
Yes,
that.
they
That's
did.
awesome.
Yeah, they did adopt some of what we think, and I was so happy that Jessica agreed. It does appear that, well, in discussions with Erin and she's gone, can correct me that, when I've talked with Erin about that landowners, the way the statute is written and the way that I understand it, landowners can donate through the end of 2031. And that section in the statute says they shall receive a tax credit. Then they go into the cap years saying, it's 50 million through 2031. Then it doesn't say anything else what happens after that. And there's not an exception that says if you donate in 2031 but there are no tax credits, you don't get a tax credit. In my discussions with Aaron Welch, he said, we're prepared to issue those. What revenue is going to do with those right now, we don't know. But revenue is supposed to be doing rulemaking too to kind of address these things. And I will have to say, revenue has some cleanup to do on their rulemaking, because I just submitted a question to Josh Pence, who's the Department of Revenue policy advisor, I think is his title, to ask a question. He said, well, our rules don't reflect the statute, but here's what we think about this. So I think we need to take advantage of that. But long story short, they're supposed to be doing rulemaking, and I think this is something that we need to get clarified in rulemaking. Jessica, do you have anything to add?
And get it extended and or get the sunset lifted.
Well, that we can't do without legislation getting extended.
We need to do that.
Yeah, Jessica's saying, she doesn't have the microphone, so I'll just say it for you, that we need to get it extended and get the sunset either lifted or extended, which that will take legislation. And in the meantime, Robin, we're going to put so much on your plate, but we're going to let you finish waiting to get to start your job on June 2nd and get a month under your belt. But then we have lots and lots of projects to talk to you about. And one of them is exactly that, figuring out what the heck happens once the 2031 tax credits are being issued. Can they issue 2032s, and how many can they issue? We have to figure it out, and we're going to have to figure it out in the next 4 to 6 months, because we're going to hit that number by then. So that it's going to be important, but we don't know the answer to it.
This might be a really rudimentary question, but thinking about that California resident who has the ranch in Colorado, I believe they have a Colorado limited liability company, and so wouldn't that hold the tax credit even if in 3 years they're still living in California? You know what I mean? Do they need to be in Colorado in that situation?
They don't need to be in Colorado at all anymore. So there used to be a provision that if you were a individual owner of the land, you had to be a Colorado resident, but we got rid of that several years ago. So they can hold the tax credit either in the LLC, they can leave it there for however many years they want, or they can pass it through to themselves. So
right, but for the Like in your case, you were talking about the landowner who lost $80,000.
That was a buyer.
Oh, that was the buyer.
Yeah, that was the buyer. That's why it was a problem, because the buyer couldn't resell it. Yep.
Getting my steps in today.
Well, I wanted to emphasize what Ariel, Jody, and John all said, which is, I think it's easy to think that 31 is far away, but the truth is that if you're talking to a landowner today about a full-size credit, a $5 million credit, you're already, in all likelihood, running into this deadline.
Right.
And so the sooner, it's possible that it'll be able to be addressed in rulemaking by the Department of Revenue this fall. But the problem with that, and this is perhaps, I haven't met you, Robin, but this is perhaps directed at that, they're going to say no. That's their rulemaking. And so if we let that happen, that's what's coming. And so someone, and some of us need to be actively working this right now to get the answer to be yes. This coming fall when they do rulemaking, if they choose to address it.
Yeah.
I'm just checking on the time. Any other questions from the audience? Perfect.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about the market side for the credits. Brendan, I know you mentioned that that's chilling a bit among buyers, but I'm curious, especially among corporations, if you're seeing any commonalities in the kind of industry that's interested in being a buyer, or if it's kind of just whoever's aware of the program. And similarly, if there are any efforts to aggregate potential buyers and have that be a more clear chain for landowners who are interested in being sellers and having a steady supply of people who would be interested in buying the credits.
Sure. So I do want to clarify that when I said chilling, I meant more for future years credits. You know, there's a very active and robust market. If you had a 25 credit, you could sell it today, full fair market value. So it's just, you know, again, it's a strong program. There's a strong market behind it. I'd just like to remind everyone that those buyers are out there. You know, I don't have nearly the breadth or depth of experience with buyers as Jody and Ariel and Mike do. Sort of an interesting nuance that we put into SB 24-126, if I got that right, was that now insurance premium tax can actually be covered with the tax credit certificates. And it was a really small tweak, and it was one of these things where we put the language in, and I don't know if anyone really was paying attention to it, which is unfortunately sort of how policy works sometimes. But that opened up a new pool of buyers, and so that was just a strategy for us to increase. How can we make more buyers, more demand on the back end, so that we have an active market that drives up pricing and things like that, and that the benefit of not to get an insurance premium tax, but insurance companies are taxed based on the number of premiums they have rather than their profit and loss. So they have a pretty consistent tax liability, and that was another area. And so that's, I think, as we look at the future years credits, one opportunity as well, that more predictable tax liability for those insurance companies, and they just kind of think further out in the future. It's their problem, it's their job to think what sort of weird stuff could happen in the future. Beyond that, I would defer to others to talk about what types of buyers they're seeing. We've worked with buyers from all sorts of different industries at this point. I think what we struggle with, what we'd like to see is a buyer that actually cares what we do. I hate to put it that way, but it can be pretty transactional. They're just taking, they're reducing their tax liability. It's a benefit to them. I'd love to see some of our ag companies in Colorado take an interest in these conservation easement tax credits that are generated by working lands that are supporting their supply chain and integrate that more into they could call it their sustainability campaign, or even just to see the value in their own tax portfolio. So that's at least our perspective at the moment. I'd be curious to hear from others.
I'm glad you have that aspiration, and I have worked with 2 different land trusts who are no longer brokering credits, but did used to broker their own credits from their own landowners, same situation. And they actually had 2 different goodwill buyers who bought at $1 for dollar. And one was a mineral company, so they were greenwashing, I guess, but who cares? It's like 100 cents on the dollar. And the other one was a bank. And they were locally invested entities. They didn't get any publicity out of it. They just wanted to buy at $1 for dollar. So A, contact your local mineral company, and B, reach out to your bank. The banks, the local and nationally, any FDIC insured bank has to reinvest 2.5% of their earnings into their communities. And so there's a huge push for them to make donations, and this would be really good for them to do that. So I think those markets are there, just we need to lean into them a little more and get the sweetheart buyers that may not have thought of this otherwise.
That's a great idea. And one thing that our firm has done for, I don't know, pretty much since I started, is if you have a landowner who brings their own buyer, we discount the amount of our commission, and then they can pick whatever price they want. So if you have someone who's willing to buy at 100 cents on the dollar, that savings can all go to the landowner, and you could still work with us, and I'm guessing you guys probably do something similar, so that you don't have to become a tax credit broker to do that. You don't have to figure out the contracts and do all that kind of stuff. You can do that through us. So if you do build those relationships, or if your actual landowners build those relationships, then they can get the benefit of that. And that's great. That always makes me happy.
Any other questions?
Ooh, is it time for us to ask them questions?
Yes.
Yay.
Oh, how the turntables. All right. I'm trying to think of how to do this because I want to make sure we can hear everyone.
You're going to get to run that microphone. I can help run one too.
That's okay. So we're going to ask you guys some questions. And I'll just start. Has anyone had a landowner back out of doing a conservation easement because of their concerns around the tax credit and the future year credit? Do you want to share with the group? Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah, so the landowner that I've worked with, he did not decide to back out because of uncertainty around future year's credits. He decided to back out because of the uncertainty of being able to get the certificate for the tax credits. He said if there's not 100% certainty that when I close my conservation easement, that my credit will be approved, then that's too much risk for me.
Oh, wow.
We've had a number of conversations about all of the changes that have occurred within the system and the lack of rejections that exist within it. But we can't guarantee 100%. We've talked to him about the preliminary advisory opinion that the CEOC can give, and that's probably not enough either. He wants 100% certainty that if he records, he will get his certificates. And that's something that I don't know if anybody can add to, providing that certainty, but that's what this landowner's looking for.
Oh, you did the best you could. That's a tall order.
Oh my gosh. I just thought of another question, but I can't. I'll just go back to my paper. Anyone else have anything to add on? Oh yeah, okay.
It's a little different anecdote, but the time at which somebody can realize their tax credit has reduced the donation. So where we were able to get a larger donation for a current year tax credit, landowner that I'm working with right now doesn't want to donate as much.
Not as much acreage, is that what you mean?
Not as much value.
Oh, so they
And
want
so
a bigger
we're-
bargain sale?
Yes.
Okay,
so
got it.
Instead of them donating half the value, let's say $1.5 million, they're donating 250,000, and we have to figure out where to fund the rest. So it's cooled their interest in making a larger donation eligible for tax credit.
Caroline, since you don't have the mic, you just got it, I'm going to jump in with a question I have, if that's okay. So I'm sure everyone in the room knows that the percentage goes from 90% to 80% on January 1st, 2027. So I'm curious how, if we're starting to feel the pressure of that, I mean, when this bill passed a year ago, 2027 seemed really far away, but now that it's, May 20, whatever, 2025, 2027 is seeming really close. So are you guys seeing any stress around that yet? And I anticipate that there will be a very, very busy December of 2026. So I'm wondering what's going on in people's experiences.
Yeah, I have one project, you've already talked to the landowner, and we talked about it last night, but where it's two-phase easement. We spent 1.5 years doing the water engineering and appraisal work to cook it. And so we're on the cusp, knock on wood, where's the wood? We'll be fully funded in June, and I've already hired all the contractors. We can close phase 1 by the end of the year. It helps being a certified entity within RCS, and that our partner on that, Cattlemen's, is as well. But I'm definitely feeling the pressure of, yep, I got to get the funds for next year, because, well, I don't think they would walk if we're not going to if we can't close both phases in time to have a shot at it. The option will allow them to do it. And, personally, this bargain sale easement, I mean, there's a lot of money in play with this. If it all works out, I still feel confident we'll work it out. But, that the 10% figure can be pretty darn high, as we all know. It's not often, the projects I work on, that's not tens of thousands of dollars. It's hundreds of thousands, if not millions. So, yeah, I mean, I'm feeling the pressure, but if you want to conserve water rights that aren't subject to the Colorado Compact, there you go. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that there's anything we can do about it. Just do your best, plan ahead, and, recognize there's still a lot of money in play if you do find yourself where it's going to be 80 versus 90. But I wouldn't lie if I said it'd be really cool if that would go a little longer than 2027 at this point.
Yeah.
Sally, come in.
I think where that switch from 90 to 80 is showing up for me, I work in the San Luis Valley, and so land value, that's going to be a different conversation. So that's where this is coming into my conversations.
Yeah. That $200,000 refund is going to be really good for people like that who, why sell any tax credits? Submit your application to the state on your own, take your refund, and you get to keep it. And when we were talking $5 million, most people can't use that. I mean, that'd be a lot of refunds. But yeah, that's so great for them.
Pam, I'm wondering if is that something you and Sean could help landowners with and the land trust with doing some of that planning up front before they even go down the road of getting a certificate? To time it out, decide whether it makes sense to try and get it done before 2027, that sort of thing?
Yeah, we definitely can. I think the big question here is we've got to determine, is this taxable, is this not? If we can come up with some kind of, guidance on, no, these refunds are not taxable, then it changes the whole game. It's a huge thing. And I will share with everyone I know as soon as we kind of find some kind of guidance on this, and I'm not sure where to go to find this, but we will definitely be researching this and looking into it.
All right, I'm going to awkwardly come back on stage because we only have a couple minutes left and wanted to give each of you a chance to share. What's one thing you hope the audience takes away from today's conversation? Ariel, you can go first.
Oh, great. I was going to wait and hear what they said first. Well, I think the most important thing to take away from this is to really talk through with your landowners what's best for them. It's going to be different for every single one of them. You know, just like Sally was saying, for some people, it might make sense to get a smaller tax credit and do a bargain sale so they have cash at closing, because getting a 2029 certificate at 90% may not be as good as getting a little bucket of cash on, you know, January 15th of 2027 and then a smaller tax credit. There's so many factors, making sure you're talking to your accountant, just really understanding what the options are and talking through it. And I know it's hard for nonprofits to have some of these conversations. And so, you know, also use us tax credit brokers as a buffer to talk about that. We're not nonprofit. Well, Mike's a nonprofit, but Mike, do you talk to people about like their tax planning with the tax credits? Is that something that you're comfortable doing? I know Jody and I each will have those conversations with the landowners and with their accountants. A mic's coming to you. A mic for Mike, yeah.
Yeah, I talk to people all the time with telling them this isn't tax advice, this is just me saying what I've seen out there. I'm not your accountant. So by the time you go through all those equivocations, sure, then, you know, you don't want to leave people hanging if you have good answers to some of their questions.
Yeah. So use us to help with those conversations when they get out of your comfort zone. But I think it's very important that now with things changing and all of that, that we have really open conversations early with the landowners.
Brendan, you're up.
Sure, yeah, and I think I've certainly emphasized the transparency and the need to make sure you're bringing in outside, or the landowners bringing in outside counsel. I would encourage everyone to be creative. This is far from a crisis. You know, there are definitely some issues on the horizon, but at the moment it's a manageable situation. And I think as the land trust community, we need to think about other potentially tools to come in here. You know, can we find a low interest loan opportunity to help people with that kind of closing, you know, so that they're not sitting on credits, or that an easement isn't out of reach because they have debt. And so the Colorado Department of Ag has a low interest loan program. We're trying to chat with them to see, okay, is there some way they can help in this mix with some low interest financing to get, you know, and would they be comfortable using credits as collateral? And we haven't even talked about mortgage subordinations today, but that's a whole nother can of worms as far as getting a bank on the phone and convincing them that these things are real. So I just mean, or could we go to a foundation and think about like a program related investment or something like that, a really low interest loan that's maybe not the entire, you know, tax credit certificate, but it's maybe a couple $100,000 if that's, you know, it allows them to pay off the transaction costs, it gets them some cash infusion, and then they can sit and wait and sell those tax credits and they can pay off that loan. So that's just, you know, one concept. Obviously, we have to be low interest. And then I think, you know, some of our funders out there also need to also think about how can we just do smaller bargain sales? You know, some of these where it's, again, a couple $100,000 would go a long way in having that cash at closing, making someone feel good for the 3 years that they need to sit on those credits. And so those are just some of these areas where I think we need to, you know, let's not dwell too much on, we're in 2028. Let's find some solutions here and think about how we, you know, as a community move forward in addressing some of these, at least in an interim issue, get some other tools on the table for landowners.
Awesome.
I love that, Brendan. I'm just going to reiterate, when we asked you, are you having people walk because of this? Really not many. I mean, we have this gentleman who's clearly got a risk problem. You know, I don't think you can do anything for him about that. And it sounds like Crested Butte had a little bit of a pullback, but we're not seeing, you know, everybody walking away from doing easements. So you're right, it's not a crisis. This is a great opportunity to be more creative. So Pam, I bought you a little more time to think about.
Oh, perfect. Well, Ariel pretty much covered everything I can say. I think the biggest takeaway from this is planning. You know, make sure your landowners know what they're up against. You know, what are the tax implications going to be, and let them know there is help out there. I mean, you know, there's so many professionals that they can reach out to help through this whole process, you know, between the tax brokers and the attorneys and the CPAs. You know, we love to help people. You know, we obviously charge for it, but it's a good feeling to, you know, be able to say, yeah, we really maximized our cash flow, and, you know, to see them walk away happy is, yeah, that worked out great. You know, and like I say, we, you know, with all the tax planning and working with all the professionals, it's definitely worth it to encourage landowners to do that.
Yay.
Let's give a hand for our wonderful panelists.